Hey everyone, for today's video, I'll be going over Roy's Dream Awakening, as well as talking about his kit in a similar style that I do my showcases in. I won't mention the buffs as I already did in a past video a couple of days ago when I went over all the new buffs, but I'll just go over his abilities and arts and just basically talking about it like we already know what it is. Anyways, starting off, he's a water human and his slots are 6-star physical, 5-star heal, and 4-star defense. Not the best slots, they're pretty okay, but nothing too crazy. As for his skill, it increases the crit rate of the skill by 50% and break power of the skill by 70% if he uses it during the enemy's arts, with 2000 break and an 8-second CT. Pretty okay, nothing too crazy as well, although it's kind of good when used during the enemy's arts, but that's about it. For his arts, it does 18,000 water damage physical, and during the enemy's arts, the crit rate of the art is increased by 100%, and the break power of the skill is increased by 200% with 3500 break. Similar to his skill, although quite a bit better. It's unfortunate since it's limited to the duration of the enemy using their art. For enemies with longer arts, it's certainly nice since you can pop out a couple of these, with each art doing around 10,500 break, not bad for sure. Moving on to his true art, it does 45,000 water damage physical, it has a 100% chance to ultimate freeze with 6,000 break, and for anyone wondering, ultimate freeze not only stops the enemy's actions, but lowers their crit resistance by 100% for the duration of the freeze. It's certainly nice that it's a 100% chance to freeze, and while not having the best modifier, it's somewhat okay on an easier stage, and even works if you need a freezer. For his passives, he increases Reyes' attack by 50%, all allies get 20% damage resist, and he heals his health by 60 a second when he's near death. The attack buff for Reyes is certainly nice, as is his heal when near death, although the best passive is definitely that AoE damage resist. Having a base of 20% damage resist for all allies is insanely good for the endgame and is really good for survivability overall. As for his dream passives, his Crimson Dream increases his crit damage by 300%, whereas his Aqueous Dream increases his break power by 80% against fire enemies, and arts by 3 a second. From the two of these, I would recommend the Crimson Dream for that 300% crit damage. It basically allows him to become a somewhat useful DPS. While not the greatest, his damage isn't actually too bad. He's actually usable in some harder content, which is definitely nice, especially considering he'll be able to put that AoE damage resist passive to use. Although I could definitely see a time coming when he needs that break power against fire enemies, but that's more so niche, whereas his crit damage can be used in a lot more fights. As for his true weapon, it didn't get any buffs, but it's a 5-star physical, increases all allies attack by 30% with a 60-second CT, and the passive gives Roy 20% damage and 10% damage when near death. It's not the greatest by today's standards by any means. I do wish this would have gotten a buff along with the unit, but it is what it is. There are certainly a lot of good alternatives to this. You could either use Bakuzan and Kyoru, Mizuki's true weapon, Cold Excalibur, or if you're going to use him for break, regular Bakuzan works good for him. As for his heal slot, there's not much leeway here. Maybe the Ultra Relic Empty Heart, Fina's Devil Wings, or Wicked Globe. This shouldn't really matter unless you need a cleanse like Keratos or a revive like Blessed Necklace or Sounding Staff. As for his 4-star defense, it kind of depends on the missions that he's playing, but just use something that'll resist the type of damage that the enemy does, like Elastomir Suit for magic damage, Dola Armor for water, and so on. Attack up or break power up works great for him, depending on which path you choose for him. But as for some team comps I've been using him in, I kind of just use him in whatever comp gives him crit to allow that 300% crit damage to run, like using him with War God Fen, and on stages that have resistance to crit, I'll pair War God Fen and Ainz together to allow him to crit. I've actually been enjoying using him along with Water Amelia since her art actually helps with freeze and water resist, which will allow him to hit his ultimate freeze a lot more often, as well as doing a little bit more damage from that water debuff. And her art being able to time stop an enemy is actually really strong since it can allow Roy to get a lot more of his arts in since she's stopping them while their arts is still active. It's pretty good to spam his art and do a ton of break in a short amount of time. But yeah, in general, he's not the best unit in the game of course, but he's not too disappointing as a Dream Awoken unit to be honest. Definitely refreshing to be able to use Roy as a DPS in some newer content. He does need some crit support when he can't freeze, which is definitely unfortunate. I wish either his art or true art lowered freeze resist, but it's fine. One thing he did need was some sort of break resist lowering, maybe on his skill, because without it, he's not the best break-wise. Basically, Roy's alter ego, Satsuki, not only has more break power on her art, but lowers break resistance against the enemy, making her much more viable as a breaker than Roy. I think he would have been more viable as a breaker if he had that, but it is what it is. For newer players who might get him, he'll be a fun addition to your team and a somewhat okay, although not insane DPS. Let me know your thoughts about him and whether or not you've used him at all. If you did enjoy the showcase, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.